trust that you guys still have lots of like mental juices flowing in your minds to listen to me harp on about bootstrapping UX. Now, maybe, you know, like when I get given a topic for a talk, I kind of sort of follow it, but then I kind of go off on my own agenda. So I trust that this is going to be of value to you, maybe wider than just UX. And so, who am I? My name is Jason Grant. I coach people design thinking nowadays, where I spent years of my life doing UX design, and now I do lots of service design as well. And increasingly more what they call sort of organization design or organization-wide experience installation, so to speak. And so, bootstrap, the word bootstrap, I always kind of look up definitions for things that I'm not really sure as to what it means, but it's a technique of starting with existing resources to create something more complex and effective. It doesn't necessarily mean doing things with nothing, but starting from nothing is kind of often a guaranteed stage to start from. So if you just left prison or something, you'll be starting with nothing. And the question is like, how can you bootstrap your life from there, or a business, or anything? But oftentimes we have a little bit of resources, but we can bootstrap from those little bit of resources. And so, first things I want to talk about a little bit is philosophy, right? And I trust this is going to make sense. So I often open with this kind of phrase, which is in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. From the Holy Bible, and it just states that, you know, we first say something or write something down and then design from there. So creation starts from the Word, and the Word is sound, and kind of universe is this kind of sonic structure. So like one of the questions you could ask yourself is, who are you? So my friend here that I've just met, who are you?
What's my name? Ilan, I'm site designer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So who are you?
I'm Steph. I work here at the Centre for UX Design.
Okay. So typically people to this question of who they are answer with what their name is, and you are not your name. And when you say I'm a service designer, that's what you do. But who you are is a little bit deeper than that.
Well, we have a context to it as well, where we say, if you ask me who am I in some other context, I'll probably answer something else.
Yeah. Okay.
If we were in a cafe, I'd probably ask you to answer something else.
So
there
you are
is a
something.
context to my answer.
So in your philosophy, who you are different things in different contexts in this description. Why did you say that you are Steph and you work here?
Because it seemed relevant, like you're saying, with the context of why we're all here today. If you'd asked me in some other place like the cafe, I wouldn't have given you that information because I wouldn't have wanted you to have that information.
If I asked you who are you in a cafe, what would you say?
Depends on the interaction.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're different things in different contexts. It's just like this kind of dynamic thing.
I think you're always the same person. You just choose what to say. So you're different. And I think you're always the same. At the core, you're the same person. You just target this.
But you might think about yourself differently.
It's too abstract. Just abstract.
Okay.
You have to have a context to it.
See, they're thinking. That's good.
Yeah.
Okay. So here's another question. What do you know? Rachel, what do you know?
My question is about what? What do you want? Like,
What do you know for sure?
sure, that I'm alive.
Okay.
Or-
Okay. What do you know?
I know that I know nothing.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay, that's interesting. So I think with the philosophy thing is a little bit kind of like going into the depths of this notion of resources, right? And kind of where does everything sort of come from? And I recently came across this kind of science hierarchy which talks about the stack of sciences. So everything starts with maths, because maths describes these kind of universal laws of how, like, you know, how numbers add up. Then physics builds on top of that with kind of universal laws of movement and gravity and all this kind of stuff. Then we've got chemistry, and then biology and psychology. So with maths, things are much more predictable and simpler. And with psychology, things are much more complex and less predictable. Okay, so we as designers work with human psychology, and humans are a wicked problem because you never really know what they're going to tell you. So if I ask you, who are you, you're going to tell me different things all the time. Or what do you know? You don't even really know what you know, right? Or you kind of know certain things. You know, it's kind of weird in that sense. And so in terms of knowledge types, things also stack up like this in terms of data, and you get insights from data. There's kind of some theories and hypotheses that get developed from that, and then that turns into knowledge, which isn't necessarily universally applicable, and from that we derive some rules and eventually wisdom, which there's less of, but it's kind of universally appealing. And so it's good to learn from your mistakes, but it's better to learn from other people's mistakes, and that's what Warren Buffett says. So it kind of links back to this, what do you know? And then if you're learning from other people's mistakes, if you don't know what you know, you're learning from other people's mistakes, how do you know what they know and whether their knowledge is of any value, and so on. So this is kind of like a big, so to speak, trick in the world of design and design thinking, and really kind of this inquiry of existence. And so there's things like string theory that talk about like how everything starts from strings and everything's this wave and so on. And then there's even like superstring theory, and all builds up from there. But like, where is the beginning? What's the kind of the essence of it? And you know, I've said that true innovation resides in the unbelievable realm, i.e., where we believe that things are not possible, but actually that's where the real innovation comes from. It's like 10, 20 years ago, I wouldn't believe that, you know, the internet would be almost like in our brains, but it's getting there. So that's becoming much more believable and standard. So the idea here is that you are the creator, okay? You are actually creating experiences and creating things. And really, how does it all string together, going off the string theory? Design, okay? Design is the thing that kind of strings all these things together, because when we go back to sciences, as designers, we have to know a bit of maths, you know, ratios, golden ratio, that kind of stuff, understand the human psychology, certainly, but from all this kind of chemical perspective, biological, physical, and so on, understand the physics of things, even in interaction design and so on, and what's kind of natural to people to observe and see and understand and know, okay? So really, design is effectively applied philosophy, okay? That's what design is. And look how that like UX Coach logo went right above Steve Jobs' head. That's what he was really, that's who he was coached by. So it's interesting, even like you see the UX Coach logo, when I designed this like a year and a half ago, I just kind of felt this symbol. At the moment, I'm listening to Carl Jung's kind of psychology stuff and how like symbols affect people. And I felt this symbol, and you know, the actual visual designer who was telling me, like, oh, you shouldn't have the lines like this, whatever. I was like, no, I just feel it like this. And then, you know, like a month ago, I came across this thing where, you know, there's like the Vitruvian man that kind of stands like this. And they were saying in this kind of maths thing, when you draw the lines from Vitruvian man, you get these kind of lines. And that's kind of like what they call the Christ consciousness, kind of the next level of shift of awareness. So design is actually applied philosophy. And thoughts are physical. That's what Nikola Tesla said. So everything we think we are. In fact, it's like you're not what you think you are, but what you think you are. You are your thoughts. And so then user-centered design runs in this kind of process of saturation, incubation, illumination, verification, illumination being this process of like, aha, lights come on in my mind. I can see now what the solution is, but I can only see it after I interact with a bunch of users and understand their needs, etc. But I have to be able to empathize with users to be able to define who they are and what they need. I'm going to have to kind of skim through this quite quickly, I think, because I want to leave some time for questions. How am I doing on time? Well,
10 minutes.
10 minutes, all right. And then so for UX designers, it's never been the case that we just design the experience. Experience is this 6th step here. We actually are designing all these 8 processes throughout the customer life cycle, how people become aware of something, awareness, again, which is another word for consciousness, yeah, becoming conscious and aware of something. Awareness, research, how they compare, how our products and services compare with other things, what triggers people to make a selection that gets them into purchase, then experience, so you might swap that around, experience a little bit first, then get into purchase, how we get people to become loyal and become advocates. And then so, when you focus on people, you can again stack it like this, where there's human needs, there's employee needs in the company. Employees are kind of the first users because they have to build something. Then there's users, and as users are unpaid, like people who don't pay. Then you've got customers, the paying people, so you know more about them, and then you've got shareholders and so on. So this is kind of how we can stack those kind of needs and definitions. And in terms of design thinking, the first thing for the way I look at things, we first have to decide on what we're going to do, and then go through this whole empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and test. And that becomes like a kind of cycle of a unit of something that turns a thought into something of actionable value, okay? And I think that's a very important thing to then build into this kind of bootstrapping thing. So when we're talking about building companies and bootstrapping UX, usually into a company, you don't do UX design for just fun of it, you do it inside a company. The most valuable things in life you have are the ones that are given to you for free. The entire universe comes out of a big bang, which is one giant nothingness, which is what you said, that you don't know nothing. And out of that free nothingness comes everything, the stars and galaxies and so on. And so in terms of building a company and designing a company and doing UX design, we start with people, then work on building some systems, inject innovation into it, create products and services that can get money, okay, and generate growth. So even as a conceptual UX design, it's got value more than just kind of talking about, oh, shall we build some sort of voice-driven interaction system, blah, blah, blah. It's like, that's just talk, that's just words, okay? And yes, they're more valuable than us just kind of ruminating there. But as soon as we start designing something, we can actually raise capital, money, for that. And so then the idea is to build a minimal viable experience first across all these 6 sections, which is people, systems, innovation, products, money, and growth. Thin slice through all of this, and then work on bit by bit, using all the resources that you have, which are people, systems, innovation, products, money, and growth, to build a thicker slice. You might raise seed funding, and then Series A and Series B, and you're building a sustainable company that covers the whole holistic spectrum of what is important in every company. And so the problems that we have cannot be solved with the same level of thinking, i.e. consciousness with which we created them. That was Albert Einstein, who ruminated a lot, but apparently he just wrote his entire theory of relativity without referencing anyone. Is that true, David?
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah. So there's no references in his thing. He just kind of wrote it, and then all the other physicists are scratching their heads, how does he know this? But there you go. And so in a company, then, as a UX designer, it's your duty to move companies through the consciousness process, okay? And this is what we're on a mission of, coaching people design thinking. So companies start with this non-existent UX and design thinking. Nobody there knows of it even. Then they go through to unrecognized, where it's just not important. Then they go through interested, where it's yeah, okay, it's important, but it receives little funding. Then they invest into something, and the formalized programs emerge. then they commit to it as they see returns and the money coming in, as I showed in the previous diagram. And then executives start getting involved, then there's engagement across the company a little bit. It becomes core tenet of the organization. It becomes embedded more across, and eventually you have distributed UX design, where you're actually using other people's resources and thinking to do all the kind of hard work for you, and you just as a kind of core service designer and UX designer or design thinker, you're kind of more a curator of experiences, while everyone else contributes in their own ways to the whole company experience. And then in terms of that little loop that I showed in terms of design thinking where you decide, you can run these loops and stack up the entire organization's kind of projects, either from the top down or ground up. And so I've got 5 minutes. And so what I've done, for example, is I've applied the same model to my own self, where I introduced my own key performance indicators, KPIs, across all these intelligence spectrums that humans have. So it's like emotional, spiritual, physical, creative, social, and financial. So I start with happiness up top. I want to be happy every day. I decide to be happy, and that eventually results in money. And I kind of check myself against this all the time, every day. So shift happens. Thank you very much. Let's continue the conversation on this Facebook group. So I strongly invite you all to join. We run a Facebook group called Design Thinking for Business, where we can continue on with this conversation. Questions, please.
Time for questions and discussion. If you want to ask the audience any more questions, I think that's fine.
I want to ask the first question. Is that what you were expecting to hear from this presentation? Anybody? No? Is it disappointing? What do you think of our presentation?
Something that I'm personally I'm kind of familiar with most of the things that people looking at. So
Do you consider like philosophy and all this kind of nature of existence as an integral part of your design approach?
yeah, part of it. Yeah, part of things that you talked about.
Mhm.
Kind of touch
Yeah.
on them.
Because it's very hard to actually talk about like specifics on how to, do specific things inside every company, because every company is like, it's a bit like human mind, it's kind of quite unpredictable, and that's why I early on asked those questions of who are you, what do you know. Those are supposed to be like simple things, right? But if we can't answer them for ourselves, how can we answer them for the entire organization, where like IBM has got 450,000 employees worldwide, and your startup, if you're starting a startup, you first get entangled, there's like quantum entanglement of your emotional self into your project. So you start thinking, oh my God, this is like the best idea since sliced bread. I'm the first one who's had it. You really become like really precious about it. So even if you're a startup of 1, it becomes complicated. If you've got a startup of 5, 6 people, they start quarreling between each other because they don't understand these kind of first principles. And they're like, this is important, no, that's important, let's start with tech, let's start with product, no, let's start with people, start there. We need to raise money first. If we get enough money, then we're going to build it. No, it all needs to start from first principles, as I showed it to you. So if you can use these frameworks to leverage them all the time, and go like, actually, if I'm starting from nothing, that's the most powerful stage to be at, because everything's to be decided. And that's the first step in design thinking. You decide, what are we going to do? Decide, and then go and talk to some people about it. Literally.
So how do you make those decisions?
That's a good question. How do you make a decision? And this is where I think, going back to all this stuff, is you have to actually first know who you are, right? And
so I was about to ask,
Yeah.
who are you? I mean,
Yeah.
the question that you asked us.
so I
So
have
what
to
would
just
you
say,
ask-
like, I'm a spiritual being having a human experience, yeah? And in many respects, you can say I'm even emotional first, right? And that's why I was thinking, man, like maybe emotions are outcome of like, logical thinking and all this kind of stuff, whatever rational thinking means. But I actually ended up putting emotions because they guide and drive a lot of stuff that we do, like subconsciously. So I'm like, I decide to be happy in the morning. What am I happy about? This cup of water. I think someone drank from it, but I don't care.
Yeah,
I'm still going to be happy. Even if someone drank from it, I'll be okay. So I'm happy with just the ability to breathe, and then it builds up into all these other good things.
How do you like build this up as a kind of cultural aspect within a company? Like you said, it is true. Like if you are working for a startup or even a big company,
Yeah.
you never truly know them until you live with them, until you find out who they are. Even if you research them, even if you know you've been wanting to work for them for years or whatever, you don't truly know them until you work with them.
Yeah.
So how do you incorporate that into, because they hire you for the job and they have an expectation, how do you generate this on the sideline? You say start it first. What's the simplest thing you can do first?
Yeah, so you kind of first have to identify what resources you're working with, right? And like I said, that's why I defined that bootstrap first. It's like, what are the resources? And often the time resources are like, hi Steph, I really appreciate the fact that you exist, right? And it's like, she's got some spare time, so she can do some user research for me while the owner of the startup is forcing me to design something that I know is going to fail, right? And I'll say like, but Steph is doing some user research for me while I'm kind of keeping them happy as they are. But then my job is to kind of up their mindset, right? So that they can receive this new wisdom and awareness, right? And a structured approach, right? Because you can't have a molecule without at least 2 atoms first, yeah? And that's a true first principles approach. And then when people understand that, they go, oh, actually that's like the most optimized way to build anything. It's like, yeah, that's why we have like atomic design approach, right? Because if we're building something for web or sort of touchable interfaces, it's going to have some sort of input fields and some sort of text and images and video.
Yeah, designing the components, not just every page separately. And that, I agree with that. I just wondered that if they're confused with who they are, it's almost like if you're working for a startup, how do you find your pathway if they don't know who they are? So it's really weird you say that, because I did a map of who, like job roles in different industries, and then I end up just sending a picture to one of the founders and saying, what are you in this? Like, the copywriters, art directors, there are project managers, program managers, and then there are service designers, UX designers. I put it under different contexts and just got them to mark out which one they were. And what happened is they marked out 3 or 4 different roles. So I was like, that's what, it's like you're trying to define their consciousness sort of thing and who they are.
So what's the first question I ask? Who are you, right? And it's like people are many things across that whole wheel, right? They work on systems, they contribute to innovation, and that's why it needs to be holistic across all those 6 sides. And so all these things I just presented are frameworks that I use actively now on all the projects and with all clients. So I said, let's do 2 design thinking sprints and strategy for this project, and then just build it from the ground up, however many iterations it takes, right? To stack it up, but it has to stack up architecturally as a meaningful thing. It can't just be like all over the place. And if it is all over the place, we'll show that early, and you can sit back and see a picture and go like, shit dude, that's all over the place. It's like, yeah, let's string it together, yeah?
So can you go back to the slide you had up before?
Which one, this company?
The other one, your KPIs.
Okay, my
And
KPIs.
are they also things that you have discussions with companies about? I'm just curious.
Well, okay, so, this is completely off record. Right, just quote.
Not.
No, off record. I'm actually introducing this model for mapping out personas inside a large government department at the moment. So looking at personas to say, well, actually, I've been coaching people and life coaching people as well. And people then say, I said like, what do you want, right? What do you want? And I said like, I want a new boyfriend, and like, so emotionally they're depleted or whatever, and I want more money, right? So it's emotional and financial issues, right? But they'll say like, I want to lose weight. Okay, that's physical intelligence thing. But that often builds from like emotion. People might be like subconsciously emotionally kind of down, and then they eat for gratification. And really, humans, we're all humans here. We all have emotional, physical, spiritual, and creative and social intelligences. So if I were to lock you into a room for 3-4 days without you talking to anybody, you'd start going mad. I know that for a fact. So would I, so would most of us. Unless we've been kind of well trained to kind of just be in tune with our own nothingness.
But my question is more, so yeah, I actually happen to buy into all this as well, personally. But my question is, how do you have the conversations with businesses that you could bring in spiritual dimensions, in a company context, or
So
how do you practically?
it goes back to this. So there's a model called spiral dynamics, which also maps out to the 8 stages of like human awareness. I was going to actually introduce that, but there's not enough time. But people are a different level of awareness, okay, a different level of consciousness. So you kind of have to trickle feed to them this kind of stuff bit by bit and bring them to it, right? So like that's what they call like sell them on the idea, right? We kind of ask them questions. This is why we coach people as opposed to, teach people. It's like, this is how it is. And it's like, because then people give feedback of like, well, I already knew that, or I don't agree, right? Because you don't have that buy-in, right? But if I'm asking people, it's like, what kind of things do humans care about? And it's like, how would we classify this? And then people start classifying. It's like, well, there's the physical things in service design. It's like, I physically have to go into a shop and pick up a package. It's like, okay, that's a physical thing. And then there's like, I have to pay. Oh, that's a financial thing, right? Okay, so we can classify that. And it's like, and then I feel frustrated when I'm there, like waiting and waiting. It's like, that's an emotional thing, right? So you help them classify this and go, yeah, I agree with that. And guess what? That's that diagram. You sort of have to go through the motions a little bit rather than, here it is, finished cake, help them sort of mix it.
Sorry, but is that not just another version of hierarchy of needs?
Yes, exactly, it is. Yeah, but a little bit more kind of structured. Yeah. Spiral dynamics is like Maslow's hierarchy of needs is like primary school kind of feed it to a 4-year-old, and spiral dynamics is like, this is kind of a framework that we can leverage now in like bigger organizations or wherever you're working. Because even if you're working on a startup, you're not going to get funding unless you're looking to coach 1 billion people design thinking. Then people are like, interesting. If you say coach 100 people design thinking, they'll be like, yeah, good luck to me. So you need to have these like global aims.
Okay, do we have a last question? Question note. Okay, so thank you very much, Jason.
Thank you.
Great afternoon, and you finished it in style.
Thank you.